yesterday for the first time since '96. Correct.
First time since '96. Third time in the last 53 years. Eighth time ever.
I thought it was second time in the last 53 years.
Third time.
Okay.
Third time, 53 years, eighth time overall. So it has happened eight times in the history of baseball.
I remember the time in '96 when it happened. I do remember that. I think we all kind of knew it was coming, truthfully.
And the thing I think people need to understand most.
Help me on this one because I don't understand. There's a couple things I don't understand. So
this happened this year because of the players that were up for the ballot. Next year, there will be Hall of Famers. There will be guys going into the Hall because you have guys like Greg Maddux, who will be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And so will Tom Glavine. You have Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas is going to run into the same problem that these guys ran into.
Not from what I've been hearing, though. A lot of people think that he has a good, not maybe to get in first ballot, but to get a, like, 60%
listen,
of the
let's
votes.
be honest. Guys like Frank Thomas, Barry Bonds, all these guys, I think they will wind up getting in at some point, whether you agree with it or not.
And another
I'm not
person
crazy
that's going to
about
get
it,
in next year is Joe Torre, actually.
Well, that's his first year eligible, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as everything goes. So, Joe Torre, Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux will all be in the Hall next year. So people don't have to fret that, oh, my God, 1 year. It's 1 year, people, and it's because of the era. It's because of the people. You can't tell me you expected, after all of what's happened, that Barry Bonds was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, that, Roger Clemens was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Everybody knew going into it, these guys were not going to be first ballot Hall of Famers.
I think the shame of it, though, and listen, I'm not going to dispute anything with Bonds. I'm not going to dispute anything with Clemens. I'm not going to lie. I cannot look at Roger Clemens objectively because I'm still pissed that he didn't get thrown out of the game after he chucked the bat at Piazza. I thought it was the ball. We all should have known that was roid rage, folks. But anyway, I think my problems with this is I feel, and maybe I'm a little biased, but it's not really a Met thing. Mike Piazza is the greatest offensive catcher that ever lived. He revolutionized that position. He took that position to levels on an offensive end that no other player before him and no player that's come after him has been able to do. So I think he should have been in, and not a first-year nominee, but I will always say Edgar Martinez should be in the Hall of Fame. He was one of the greatest pure hitters of his era. And I remember the era he played in. It was a golden age. As much as you had all the steroid guys, you still had guys like Edgar Martinez and Tony Gwynn who never took steroids in my eyes. And you look at him, I don't think Edgar Martinez ever had over 25 home runs in a season. But
I read something in the chat.
Carl just he's mentioning that he thinks Clemens is pretty much an ass and screw him.
Word.
And
No, I was laughing because of what you said and then what Fife said about.
Let's hear it. I don't get to see it.
This goes back to the nonsense we started.
The nonsense we started with. He says
the stuff we were trying to get away from.
It was about Sarah Levy put something in the chat. Just a word.
I'm gonna regret asking this. Okay.
Dave said, we'll just try not to use said word because
cursing.
We don't want you to get kicked off Chat Tango because we love Sarah Levy and we don't want to see her go anywhere.
Yeah.
So then he said, Eric got kicked off because of that for a week and a half.
Is that what wound up happening? You didn't wind up getting banned?
And then Fife says, was it because you wouldn't ride on your jet plane, Dave? That's just
why
wrong.
He was kicked out of the chat room because he wouldn't ride on my
on your jet plane.
On my jet plane.
Well, it's got requirements and stuff, so get on that.
That was...
Anyway.
Any hoots.
I may be by myself, but, Edgar Martinez led the league in batting average about 10 times, multi-time All-Star. And he doesn't get in because he was only a designated hitter, which I think is a shame. I mean, you look at it, one of the only players who got to the All-Star game who was good enough to play in an All-Star game only being a designated hitter. One of the best hitters of his time.
So when it comes down to this, look, we all understand the Clemens thing, the Bonds thing, the Sosa thing. We get that, right? I mean, we all get that.
Well, my question, if I may, sorry to interrupt. Do you guys think anybody should have gotten in yesterday? Anybody?
Well, I mean, I'm with you on the home, but I'm with you because I'm a homer, and I wanted Piazza to get in. But that's a homer. That's all that has to do with.
I'm okay with nobody getting in. I really am. I'm okay with this year.
All right.
Biggio just missing.
Well, like,
He's another one I think should have gotten in. One of the only players to get to the All-Star game at 3 different positions.
but I
But
heard
he's
somebody
not
say
going-
about Biggio, he wasn't even the best player on his team when he played.
Exactly, and that's why. And there were other guys that played second base that didn't get in on their first ballot that had better numbers than him. Again, you got to understand the way the baseball writers are and the way
I think
the voters are.
What was it? Ryan Sandberg didn't get in his first
Yeah,
time, right?
there's a bunch
Yeah.
of guys who didn't get in. You know, I mean, we heard it on the right when we pulled in. Actually, guys like Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, they all got in first ballot, but none of them received 100% of the vote.
Yeah, nobody gets 100% of the vote.
There hasn't
yeah.
been one player in baseball history who's received 100% of the vote.
Yeah.
And that's including, I mean, you look at some of the greatest of all time. I mean, Willie Mays, I mean, how was he not on everybody's ballot? How was Babe Ruth not on everybody's ballot? It just doesn't make sense, but that's the way the Baseball Hall of Fame has been, and it's the way it'll always be.
Well, I will say, I mean...
By the way, breaking news, Jaguars just fired Mike Mularkey.
We saw that. We felt that one was coming. At least
Thought it was coming, but it just happened. So
Well, I thought-
you gotta keep in mind the new Jaguars owner. I can't remember his first name, but Khan is his last name. Shad Khan. This man is worried about bringing money to the franchise. He's worried about turning it into a very lucrative franchise.
profitable.
So he wants to get rid of this guy. He wants to bring in people that are cool with Tim Tebow, a quarterback. And I'm telling you, they are going to build this team around Tim Tebow. It's coming.
Well, listen,
It's coming.
The one thing that surprised me is that the general manager that Khan put in place, I can't remember his name, but he was former employee of the Falcons. From what I know, he had actually worked with McClarkey in the past. I think they were both in the Falcons organization at the same time. So I really thought that there was a chance he'd be willing to work with him. But, yeah, you're probably right. They're probably going with Tebow. They have to do something. And you can say what you want about Tebow. When he was playing with Denver, yeah, he led them, but they had a great defense. They have to do something about that defense as much as they have to change the offense, too. So,
agree with that.
yeah. Anyway, getting back to it, Hall of Fame. I think Kurt Schilling should have gotten it, truthfully.
See, he's one that I can see getting in the future.
Yeah. Well,
I can see. Again, Mike. You know what? I'm going to agree with you.
Listen,
if I was a voter, he would have been on my
yeah,
ballot.
because listen, I'm saying I get that. Just because you don't get in the first time, you can get in the next time, and I'm fine with that. But let's admit, I think there's players that deserved that prestige of getting in on the first ballot, like Piazza. And all right, fine, I'm a homer, but it's not entirely the homer part. I appreciate what he did to the position.
He's a great offensive catcher. He was never known for his defense, so you take that aspect of the game
No, but
out
listen,
of
the
it.
one thing I will say about him is he was a consummate gamer, and when he was behind the plate, if he had to block it and put his body at risk, he would do it every freaking time and hold on to the ball.
But you know why, and everybody knows why he didn't get in.
And listen, here's the thing. I don't believe he ever did steroids, but I agree with the people who say this is a guy who called the press conference the second everybody was thinking he was gay. Why hasn't he done the same thing with the steroids? I get that. I'm not going to argue
only
that.
that, but he had injuries that are known to be resulted injuries from steroid use. He's had things happen that, you didn't necessarily have to come out and say it, but a lot of people suspect it. And because of the era that it is right now.
And I think the problem with that is, if you're someone like me who, I get everything you're saying, I still want to believe that because we never really got anything conclusive, his name was never in the Mitchell report, he wasn't on that 2003 list, the leaked one with the 109 players who were on the experimental survey, the one that A-Rod's name was on. He wasn't on any of those lists. You remember there were the clinics, the mailing lists for the HGH, where a lot of the guys like Brian Roberts' name was mentioned on that, and all the wrestlers' names were mentioned on that. His name was never involved in any of that. So I think whereas with guys like Bonds and Sosa and Clemens, you have the probable cause, I don't really think you have probable cause or any real evidence when it comes to Piazza. Another guy, I think you could say that about, I think you may wind up giving me a little more resistance on this one. And again, part of my criteria for the Hall of Fame is I think that players that define franchises for periods of time should be in the Hall of Fame. So I believe there's a case for Craig Biggio. Jeff Bagwell. I'll always believe there's a case for him. And I know he's the first one that everybody accuses of steroids, even though he was never on that list either. I don't know that you can really say that with those guys.
But they're looking at the whole era that way. And if there's any question, they're erring on the side of caution.
And I get that, but I think that's one of the problems here. Whereas, listen, I'll believe 70% of all players during that time did steroids. There was still 30% that didn't. And as much as you don't have a clear list of who did and who didn't, you can't turn it into a witch hunt.
No, you can't turn it into a witch hunt. But again, it's as far as first ballot guys, I'm okay with these guys not getting in on their first shot.
But like I said, though, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really make a difference if you make it on your first ballot or your fifth ballot. But like I said, I think there is a little bit of prestige that comes with getting in on the first ballot. And I do think guys like Piazza, Schilling, Biggio, I think they could. I think they should have. In my opinion, I think they should have been first ballots. But I also think Edgar Martinez should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. And obviously, I was proven wrong on that one.
Yeah. He was a DH.
I still say one of the greatest pure hitters of the period of time from 1995 to 2010. One of the top 3 pure hitters in that time. Probably one of the best 30 pure hitters in the history of the game. No question in my eyes.
Like I said, I went with the homer thing. I like Piazza. I almost said pizza. It just happened. But so, you know, I'm looking over at right now, and I got all the different players in front of me and the percentage of votes they got. Is anybody surprised that like Clemens got 37%, or like, is anybody surprised that these guys even receive votes?
No. Because they're gonna. There are writers out there, and there are baseball people out there that believe it's the era, and that when they go in, there should just almost be like a separate little wing for these guys. Of listen, this was the era of the time, and these were the guys that were the best in that era, and they think that there's a way to get these guys in and not have it tarnish the game. But this is the same league that the all-time hits leader isn't in the Hall of Fame.
And I'm actually happy you brought that up.
A guy who, in Shoeless Joe Jackson, I was telling you, Dave, he had the best batting average, I think, ever for a World Series.
Something
and yet
like
he was accused of being in the Black Sox scandal where they threw the World Series. The guy batted close to 500 and played outstanding. Had like 12 ribbies. He played unbelievable baseball, and he got banned.
There's 2 points I want to make to that, because actually I did a little research on that a little while ago. There was never any conclusive evidence that he was actually involved in the actual Black Sox scandal of throwing.
Never.
But the one thing they do say is his hits in that World Series, they try to make the conspiracy theory that they only came during times where the White Sox were basically already out of it, or basically at times where it didn't matter, where the outcome of the game was already decided.
He didn't. But it's not like he batted unbelievably.
Listen, I'm kind of agreeing with you on this. You want my honest opinion? As much as I feel like Bonds and Clemens did it to themselves, as much as they were both Hall of Famers before they did the steroids, and as a result of that, I don't think they deserve to be in it. I think they're both going to get in. But I feel if Bonds and Clemens do get in, Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe should be right behind them.
Absolutely.
And I don't think behind them.
And I don't think that this steroid era should be accepted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. If you're not going to accept Joe Jackson and you're not going to accept Pete Rose, the guy had the most hits by far of anybody ever.
The reason you always hear the difference is there was the rule on the books about the gambling in baseball. There was never actually any rule on the books in terms of steroids being illegal in the game. But you know something? You have to look at it in the context of the times. And the fact is, the The gambling rule was put into place because this was in the early 1900s, where you did have to worry about guys throwing games for not financial gain, because there was not a lot of money being thrown around in baseball, and you had owners like the White Sox owner who would routinely screw with the paychecks of their players. So you had to put those rules into place to protect the integrity of the game. But in the 70s and the 80s, the integrity of the game is secure. Pete Rose never threw a game because of a bet he made.
Well, isn't it true he never bet on a game his team played in?
As a player, he never betted on a game. He only did it as a manager. And we understand all the time that there are guys who go into the Hall of Fame, like Joe Torre. If he goes in the Hall of Fame, he's going in as a manager. He's not going in as a player. So you understand that there are differences in going in as a player or as a manager, going in as a broadcaster, or something else. So I think that distinction should have been made with Pete Rose. All right, Pete Rose, the manager, does not belong in the Hall of Fame, but you didn't do anything that really scarred your legacy as a player. At least not in my eyes.
Yeah, but again, so we're all kind of in agreement.
We are in agreement.
Yeah, no, we really are. We're getting loud, but we all agree.
Let's wrap it up with this.
Yeah.
The idea of perhaps maybe one day letting these guys, like me and Pixel were just going back and forth in our chat room. The idea of one day putting these guys, the steroid guys, the assumption guys, or just say the 90s generation of players. Well, I don't care how you do it, but you can figure that part out. But the idea of maybe one day just putting them into a certain area of the hall where they're on their own and they're on display as a negative example of this was our bad error, or like
brings me to a good question. I actually heard it on Outside the Lines yesterday. Is baseball's Hall of Fame, do you consider it more of a shrine to the greatest players ever, or do you consider it more of a museum of baseball history? And that's what you have to decide between. Is it these were the greatest of the greats and these are the guys we should remember? Or is this let's tell a story of of baseball and the progression of it and the different eras of it?
See, I think that's a good question. And
that's a very good one.
To me, it's a shrine to the greatest of the greats. And I say that because you know what? When you go to the Natural History Museum and you see the woolly mammoth and the cavemen and these and that, you know what? That wasn't the greatest woolly mammoth of all time. Those weren't the greatest cavemen of all time. They are examples of things that happened in our history that helped us get to here. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe in the Hall of Fame, you should tell the story of how the game progressed. You should show that.
I mean, in all fairness, probably should be a combination of both.
Yeah, but to me, the guys that are in there should be who are considered the best. Like, I'll never forget going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame and just walking and seeing some of these names that I'm like, I never saw you play, but I know all about you. You know what I mean? And I wish I had an opportunity to watch you play live. And then you go over to this next spot, and they have this whole like board that shows you where, like, when the league started, it was literally just 6 teams, and then they jumped to like 9 a couple, and it's like this whole graph that shows you how the league grew and where they went through the years. And these, to me, the Hall of Fame should teach you the history of the game, but it should be centered around the guys that made the game what it is. There you go. That's how I want to say it. To me, the Hall of Fame should be a example and a showing, a display, a shrine of the guys that made the game what it is today. And that's where I think the people have that right to make the argument that these guys should still be in it. Because they are part of why the game is the way it is today. They're a reason that there is so much testing. They've affected what baseball is today, and
but
in
they
that
affected
aspect,
it not necessarily in a positive way. So that goes more towards the museum aspect of than anything else. Because if to say that they were the greatest ever, and they deserve a spot next to guys like Mantle, next to guys like Ruth and Mays, I don't know if they do right now.
I don't think
Maybe
they
do in the future, but not right now.
But that's why I like the wing idea.